Hello and welcome to my favourite books read in 2019 video. Why are you filming this in April, Julianne? I hear you cry. You have clearly not seen my life update video in which I explained that I moved and I didn't have the ability to film for a few months. So here we are, doing it now. Better late than never. And to be honest, there's no time too late to talk about amazing books. So in this video, I'm going to tell you about 16 of the most brilliant books that I read last year. Now, I read 102 books last year, so it was quite hard going through and picking out ones to talk about in this video. That's why it's such a random number, 16. I also haven't chosen a favourite. However, I will highlight in this video the most outstanding books from this list to you. So without any further ado, I think I better get on with it because that is quite a lot to cover. So I'm going through these in the order in which I read them throughout the year. And the first book that I really loved that I read in 2019 was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata. This book was brilliant. It's a very strange book. It's a very short book. I read it for my work book club. It was actually, was it my suggestion? I think so, and we all really enjoyed it. So it's essentially about a woman who has been working in a convenience store for several years, and you know, she's finished university and her friends and family think she should really have moved on by now into a job more suited to her intelligence and her abilities, and that really fits their social standing. But she loves the convenience store. She adores it. Her whole life revolves around it. It's all about being a great employee. And what's really interesting is that it highlighted the contradictions inherent in this, because she works in a convenience store. It doesn't pay well. It will be really difficult for her to continue working there if she became disabled. But she loves it and it suits her personality extremely. And, you know, there isn't really an alternative option for somebody like this. When she tries getting another job, she doesn't like it at all. And what was interesting is that I found it oddly relatable. You know, I've worked in jobs in retail. I've worked retail jobs. I've worked jobs where you do the same thing every day. You know, there's a routine to it, and there's something really delightful about that for me. You know, so I could really relate when she describes her joy at working in the convenience store, about knowing exactly what to do, about having a book of guidance that she can always turn to when things are difficult. And she's practically memorised this book. You know, her love of the routine, I could really, really relate to. And I know a lot of people couldn't, and they find that quite difficult to get on with because they were like, why is such an intelligent woman content with such a job like this? But I thought this book communicated that really brilliantly, and I would highly recommend it. It's just absolutely fantastic food for thought. The next book on my list is Beauty Queens by Libba Bray. This is a much older book, where I think Convenience Store Woman actually came out last year. Let me just check. Or it was, the translation came out last year anyway. 2018. So yeah, I think late in 2018. It seemed like everybody was reading it last year. Anyway, Beauty Queens came out in 2011. So this is a much older book, and I've read lots of other books by Libba Bray before. I didn't actually read this copy. In the end, I listened to the audiobook. I have actually owned this copy for a very long time, since back when I first started getting into YA again as an adult. And so it's taken me a while to get around to it, but oh my god, it was so worth it. And what's really great about the audiobook is it is read by the author, and she gives different characters and narrators different voices, and it's really interesting. So basically it's about a group of beauty pageant contestants who get well, not exactly shipwrecked. I think their plane crashes on this island, and they have to survive, even though they're not at all equipped for it, most of them anyway. Also they uncover a conspiracy from the company that runs the pageant. And what I really, really loved about this was how sympathetic and how fairly it treated all of the characters. So you might think that it's just going to be a comedy, a straightforward satire, that all of the characters are going to be awful and not relatable, but actually I warmed to all of them, even the most strange ones. And it is a very strange book. It's not realistic, it's not serious, you know. The characters are caricatures, but what Libba Bray does brilliantly is uncover the human side in all of them, and for that I really loved it. The next book I finished reading, I did actually read the paper copy of, and it is Freshers by Tom Ellen and Lucy Iverson. This is hilarious. So I absolutely loved their previous two books, Lobsters and Never Evers, and so I was really delighted to pick this up. Thank you, Jim, for lending it to me. You will get it back at some point, I promise. Not sure when. I do want to use it for one other thing. So basically it's about freshers. It's about a girl and a boy character who have gone to the same uni. They did know each other when they were at school, but they weren't like close friends or anything, although she always had a crush on him. And it's basically about the misadventures and adventures they get up to in their first year at university. And it's really relatable, really funny, and just all around brilliant, and I would highly recommend it. The next book I have to mention is Nightingale Wood by Stella Gibbons. So this is the second book by Stella Gibbons that isn't Cold Comfort Farm. She is best known for Cold Comfort Farm. But last year, or rather the year before last, in 2018, I read Pure Juliet by her, which is working a bit backwards because it was one of the last books she wrote. I think it was published posthumously. So posthumous. I can't pronounce that word. Oh my god. After she died. Anyway, I swear I can pronounce it, but maybe it's one of those words I can only pronounce in my head. There's lots of things I can only pronounce in my head, and then when I try to actually say them out loud, they get all tangled up. It's like accents. I can do lots of accents in my head, and then I can't actually do them out loud. But anyway, Nightingale Wood is a Cinderella retelling, essentially. It's about a young woman who had recently got married to essentially one of the local aristocrats. I think they're actually more middle class than that. I don't think they're titled. But anyway, she got married to like the son of the family, and they didn't really know about her because she just used to work in the shop. Anyway, then he died, and his family asked her to move in with them because they don't want her just like, you know, it's sort of keeping up appearances thing. They don't want her to work, so they want her to live with them. And it's set in, I assume it's set in the 30s. When was it written? Yeah, copyright 1938, so there's a lot of class stuff in here, which I absolutely love. I love books that deal with social class. And when she moves in with the Withers, she meets her sisters-in-law who have very different attitudes to their life, and she meets a neighbour, and their closest neighbour, or one of their closest neighbours, is basically the local heartthrob. He's very trendy and fashionable, and Viola, that's her name, the main character, has basically fancied him since she was very young, and she dreams of meeting him and him sweeping her off her feet, and but she's not the only one. It's sort of like there are multiple Cinderellas in this story, and they all have different journeys to go on. It's very hard to explain, but I loved it. What I really love about Stella Gibbons' writing is that she's brutal but fair in her descriptions of the characters. The only caveat I would give if you're thinking about reading this book is that there is one paragraph which includes the N-word twice. The character who uses it isn't a sympathetic one, and I think it's one of those things that's unfortunately representative of the time period in which it was written, because this is a book that was written in the 1930s, and Sophie Dahl, although she doesn't actually refer to this specific incident, does note the following in her introduction. A greying of characters that are otherwise empathetic stretches to their occasional bigotry, which is deeply jarring to the modern reader. Casual anti-Semitism and racism is insidious in much of the fiction from this period, and it serves as a stark commentary on the time. You can't tell from this book whether the author herself held such beliefs, and I imagine a lot of authors these days would get across the racism of the characters in a different way without actually using that word. But yeah, obviously it's impossible to know what beliefs the author herself held. But as I say, it's not a sympathetic character who uses those words, but I would hope that most authors today just wouldn't put those in there to begin with. They would signify that the character is racist in a different way, without actually using that word. And, you know, as someone who's never ever said that word in her life, I did find it really unpleasant in here. But again, it's a book from the 1930s. There's an element of what you're going to do, but I wanted to mention that because I know that some people just wouldn't want to read a book that uses those words. That word, it's the same word twice. So yeah, that's my only caveat. Otherwise, I did really enjoy it, but yeah, book from the 1930s, beware. The next book I have to talk about in this video, let me go back to my list, is Off the Clock by Laura Vanderkam. Now, Laura is a repeat favourite books read in year author. I have really enjoyed her other books, and Off the Clock, I think, is like her magnum opus of all her time management books. It is just brilliant. So what I really love about Laura Vanderkam's approach to time management is that she doesn't talk about being productive for the sake of being productive. She talks about managing your time well in order to have more time for stuff you actually like. You know, she talks about managing your time well so that you have time to go for runs in the morning if you like having runs, spending more time with your family, having more time to play and be creative and just generally enjoy life, which is a perspective that I really appreciate, because I don't want to, you know, just be good at time management to make more money, although that's a good benefit. I want to be good at time management so that I can do all the things I want to do in my one life. So Off the Clock, what's really brilliant at Off the Clock is she does actually turn her attention towards the enjoyment aspect, which has come up in some of her other books, but she really dives into it here. And basically the book is about how to feel like you have more time and enough time to do all the things you love and want to do. So yeah, I would highly recommend this. If you haven't read one of her books before, I would probably recommend you also read 168 Hours, You Have More Time Than You Think, because then she really goes into her method of time tracking and making the most out of your time on a weekly basis. But this is also a very good place to start. And I would also recommend reading it after 168 Hours because it just covers so much more and broadens out her ideas. The next book I have to mention, I raved about this book earlier in the year and I still think about it all the time, and that is The River of No Return by Bea Ridgway. I love this book so much. I can't believe it took me so long to read it after I first heard about it on YouTube. And yeah. The most tragic thing about this book is that the sequel has not been published yet, and it needs a sequel. It needs a whole world of sequels. It needs like 20 books in a series. Oh my god. It's just such an amazing world and characters that she creates, and oh, I love it. So basically, it's about this Regency period aristocrat who is about to die on a battlefield when he is hurled through into the future, and I think mid-2000s? I want to say mid-2000s. He basically comes to in the mid-2000s, and he's under the care of this mysterious secret society who basically give him a load of money, send him off to different countries so that no one will ever recognise him, from like portraits and stuff, and so that he doesn't like get involved too much in the present day. Basically they send him off to have a nice life in America and tell him that it's very sad, but he can never go back, he can never see his family again, or the woman that he had a big crush on. And he goes off and he has this life, and then one day they call him up and he has to go to a meeting, and they tell him, actually we lied, it's not a river of no return, you can go back and we want you to go back. And so he has to go back, and there's this whole massive conspiracy that's going on, and he doesn't know who to trust. And what's brilliant about the book is it really confronts his privilege as a wealthy aristocrat from that time period, and it's just fabulous. It's so fabulous. I loved it so much. And there is a short story / novella, as a sort of, is it a prequel? I think it's a prequel. It's called The Time Tutor. And I am desperate to read this, you guys. I'm desperate. And I cannot find anywhere in the UK that will sell it to me. I can't buy it off the Penguin website. Penguin published it in the US. I can't buy it off of Amazon. I can't buy it off of Apple Books, Google Play, anything. It's just you know, nowhere in the UK has the rights, and I'm losing my mind. I want it so much. So if you have any idea where I can buy The Time Tutor by Bree Ridgway, let me know in the comments, please. Please, somebody publish this thing so I can read it. And please, Bree Ridgway, if you're out there, write book 2. The next book I have to mention is The House of Secrets by Sarah Manning. Sarah Manning is a long-running favourite author of mine, and The House of Secrets being about 2 characters in different time periods who have suffered the loss of a child. Was it a stillbirth? I think a stillbirth. I thought going into it, like, this isn't going to be my kind of thing, but you know, as someone who isn't maternal, who doesn't think she wants kids, I was like, I'm not going to relate to this really. But oh my god, it was so beautifully written. I really felt the pain of these 2 women, and I was absolutely fascinated by their stories. The main character in this time period is an illustrator, and I could really relate to that. The main character back in, is it post-war? I think it's just after the Second World War. She's an actress, and she has a lot of other stuff going on in her life. And I realised whilst reading this that I think my problem is books where a main character is a mother or wants to be a mother, and that's everything. She has nothing else going on. And although these characters are very distracted from their other ambitions by their desire to have children, they do have other ambitions, and so that made them much more relatable to me. And the story is just gripping. I really, really loved it. The next book I have to mention is My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I think I've pronounced that correctly. Again, I'm basing this off of how other people have pronounced it in videos. This book. I know quite a few people were disappointed by this book, but for me, it just really got me going. I think it's because it's about sisters, and books about sisters always have like that deeper level to me, because I have a sister who means the world to me, and so yeah, sisters are like my button. You could press my button in a book by having sisters and by having a really interesting sibling relationship. So My Sister the Serial Killer is a book that basically does what it says on the tin. It's about a woman whose sister is a serial killer and keeps calling her up because she's accidentally murdered her boyfriends, or has just murdered her boyfriends. You know, something's gone wrong in their relationship and she's killed them. And you know, this is just a pattern that they have, that they've fallen into, until one day her sister sets her sight on her work crush, and she's like, she's really worried that her sister's going to kill him, and or that she is going to have to tell people what's been going on and get her sister locked up. And there's this amazing conflict there, and it's just really brilliant. It's really funny, it's really dark, and I would highly recommend it. We read it for my work book club again, and I don't have a physical copy of it. I think, did I borrow it from the library? I think I borrowed it from the library. Like, I also borrowed The River of No Return and The House of Secrets from the library. So 3 library books in a row. It was great. I loved it. The next book I have to mention, where is it gone, is Margot and Me by Juno Dawson. This is another, first of a couple of books actually, which are part set during the Second World War. So this is mainly set in the 90s, I think. It's about a girl called Fliss who, because her mum is recovering from cancer, goes to stay with her grandmother in the countryside. And while she's there, she discovers her grandmother's diary from the war. And I think this is the best book by Juno Dawson that I have read. I was absolutely gripped. I can't say I couldn't put it down because I actually read the audiobook of this, naturally, because I have a habit of doing that. But oh my god, it was just brilliant. It was so moving, and I was there. I was just right there with both of them. I found them so relatable, and I loved it, and I wish Juno would write more books like this, because it was just, it was fantastic. The next one is actually 2 books. I'm going to mention them together because I read them in quick succession and they're by the same author. The Loneliest Girl in the Universe and The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James. So these are both science fiction books. The Loneliest Girl in the Universe is about a girl who is the only surviving passenger on what was supposed to be a ship travelling across the universe to find a new home for humans, and she is in contact with Earth via her psychotherapist. Yeah, like she has like a NASA sponsored therapist who she talks to all the time, but as she gets further and further away from Earth and closer to her destination, it takes longer for the messages to go back and forth, and you feel her incredible loneliness on the ship by herself. And then her only hope arrives when she gets news that there is another ship coming up behind her, which is newer and better and faster, and is actually going to catch up with her. And so there's a young man on the ship who is piloting it, and they start talking, and she is really happy. But then things get dark. And I won't say any more than that. The Quiet at the End of the World is a very different tone of book. It's also an incredible gripping thriller. And when the big twist was revealed, I yelled, "Holy crap!" and almost threw the book across the room. And I had to explain vaguely to my partner why I had yelled "Holy crap," because he was in the room at the time while I was reading. So it's about 2 teenagers, Lowry and Shen, who they're basically the last children ever to be born. Their parents and their whole community around them are all much older than them. They were basically the last embryos left after global infertility swept the human race. And their family and the rest of their community, which is in London, a very interesting solar punk-esque London, where because there's almost no humans, nature has reclaimed a lot of stuff, and it's very interesting. And they're completely adored by their family and community, but because they are the last 2 humans, everybody's also really desperate to solve the problem. But when everybody starts getting sick, except for Lowry and Shen, they have bigger problems. And that's when it gets really interesting. I loved both of these books. I just found them so incredibly gripping. I had read Lauren James' previous books, The Next Together and The Last Beginning, before, and so I was really excited to read these because I did really enjoy those, but these two books are just a complete whole other level in my opinion, and they are brilliant and you should read them. The next book I have to mention is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. So I started reading this in kind of an odd situation. I was on holiday and I was queuing for a bus. Queuing for a bus, and I was bored and I was hot, and I don't think I had a book on me, but I had the Kindle app and I had bought The Poet X quite some time ago, and I thought, you know what, poetry is about right because it shouldn't take me too long to read each poem. So I opened it up, downloaded the book and started, and I was gripped pretty much immediately. It is just absolutely fantastic. The relationship between the main character and her mother is just brilliant. It's basically about a young woman who wants to be a poet, and she starts writing, and she's really honest about her feelings and her relationships and what she thinks of the world around her, but her mother, who is really worried about her and very religious, disapproves, and this creates this incredibly painful tension in her life. And it's an incredibly beautiful book and quite a quick read because it's all in poetry, so yeah, I would highly recommend. The next book on this list was The True Queen by Zen Cho. I don't think I have ever anticipated a sequel as much as I anticipated The True Queen, because Sorcerer to the Crown is one of my favourite books of like the whole last decade and I was just so excited for this. I was so excited and I wasn't disappointed. What I really loved about this is it moves away from the characters in the first book, but it does feature them. They're not completely pushed aside. They do pop up, and one of their more minor characters becomes more of a major character in this book. But it is primarily about these two young women who find themselves on a beach after a storm and have no memory of who they are, but they recognise each other, so they assume that they are sisters, and just, yeah, they get taken in by one of the main characters from the previous book, who is an absolutely fabulous character. She's an ornery witch with massive arrogance, but also brilliance, and she sends them to Britain to meet Prunella from the first book and try and figure out what's happened to them, why they don't remember who they are, they suspect that they're under a curse, that kind of thing. What's really brilliant about this is the culture clash. It makes it really funny. They are from an island in Malaysia, and then they go to Britain, and the manners and the assumptions are really different. And I just absolutely loved seeing that play out. It's really funny, and most of the characters who are dealing with this are really nice, kind-hearted people, and really well-meaning, but it still creates some awkward situations, and that's just really funny and delightful. The next book I really loved that I read in 2019 was Sophia Khan Is Not Obliged by Ayesha Malik. This book is just really, really funny and really easy to read and absolutely delightful. So it's about a young Muslim woman who works in publishing, and again, lots of fabulous culture clash stuff, which is really funny and really interesting. And she gets asked to write a book about Muslim dating, which she has not been very keen on dating lately. It means that she has, and it means she has to start Muslim dating, and it's very funny and really heartwarming and interesting, and I really, really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I wasn't so keen on the sequel because it goes in a very different direction, and I fully respect what the author was doing, but it was a very different tone from the first book, and so I preferred the first book. But I really, really loved the first book, which is why it's here on this list. The next book I have to mention in this video is Our Stop by Laura Jane Williams, which I listened to on audiobook. And Laura Jane is best known probably for her memoir Becoming, which I read I think in 2018, and she also has a like self-help kind of book called Ice Cream for Breakfast, which she's also really well known for, and for her Instagram account. And I've followed her for ages, so I was really excited to read her first novel, and I absolutely adored it. It's basically a romantic comedy about people who keep missing each other on a tube, and they contact each other via a missed connections item in one of the free newspapers, and there's just a lot of near misses and drama, and it's basically about really nice people slowly falling in love. And I really loved that. It was just what I needed at the time, and I would highly recommend it if you want a romantic comedy to read. The next book on this list is Wed Wabbit by Lyssa Evans. I have to keep checking author names sometimes because I can only remember the title and not the author. Wed Wabbit is about a girl who gets hurled into the fantasy world of her little sister's favourite book, which is ruled by her little sister's favourite toy, Wed Wabbit, who in this world is an evil dictator ruining everything. And it's just completely genius. It's one of those books where you read it and you're like, I can't believe no one's ever written this before, because it's just so brilliant, so original, and at the same time kind of so obvious. Like, the idea is just so high concept and simple and brilliant. But yeah, I just completely was in awe of it, and it's such a fun, quick read. So yeah, if you want a brilliant book for kids, or you need a pick-me-up, Wed Wabbit. The next book on this list is Codename Rarity by Elizabeth Wein? Yeah, Elizabeth Wein. So I actually listened to the audiobook of this again, and the narrator are just fabulous. So there is the two main characters. There is the character who is codenamed Verity, and there is her best friend Maddie. And it's basically a love story about friendship, but also it's about unreliable narrators and truth and survival. I apologise if I'm now at a slightly different angle or height, or if the video lighting is a bit different. I ran out of battery. Anyway, I think I was talking about Codename Verity. So yeah, Codename Verity is basically a friendship love story, and just it's just so emotionally involving. I was just completely blown away by how drawn into the world of the characters I was, and I just couldn't stop listening. I was just completely gripped. If I had been reading the book, I wouldn't be able to put it down. I loved it, and I would recommend this. This is one of my absolute favourites of the year. Probably along with, I said I was going to mention it as I was going along, but I think probably with Margot and Me, The Quiet at the End of the World, and The True Queen, and Wed Wabbit. So yeah, Codename Verity is amazing, and I'm sure many people watching this already know that because it has been talked about and hyped up, and yeah, you know, it's one of those situations where all the hype is completely deserved. I adored it, and I basically want to read everything this author's ever written now. I don't want to say too much about what happens in Codename Verity because it will honestly spoil your enjoyment. I think it's one of those books it's best to go into knowing as little as possible. But essentially, Verity of the Codename at the start of the book is in a she's essentially a Nazi prisoner of war. Well, it's not really a camp, it's like she's in a building, it's in I think it's in a city or a town, but she's a prisoner, and she's being interrogated, and she has agreed to cooperate and write this account of basically her involvement in the war and all the secrets she knows. And she immediately starts telling the story of how she met her best friend Maddie, and it goes from there. it goes from there. You also get to hear from Maddie's perspective in the book, and yeah, it's just absolutely great. The final book I have to mention in this video, I think is actually a 2020 release, perhaps. Let me check on Goodreads. So it's Deep Light by Frances Hardinge, and I read this in December, and it is just completely gorgeous. It's a book set in a world where the gods, or what people know as gods, fought each other and died like a generation ago, and there are people who remember the world with the gods in it, but the youngest generation, children, and the main characters are children, don't remember it at all. The gods to them are these magical, mysterious creatures who they're absolutely fascinated by. And in this world, people use bits of the remains of the gods, who were based in the ocean, to create these weird and wonderful steampunky adventures. So the story follows this young boy who is reluctantly drawn into this plot to do some smuggling by his best friend, and he gets caught, and basically there's a kind of slave auction situation. The main punishment is for people to be indentured servants for a period of time, and he gets sent to this island, which is the island of the monks. The monks obviously used to lead the worship of the gods, but now there are no gods. The monks have are really struggling to deal with this, and so they're very well respected and they're looked after, and he becomes essentially a servant looking after them, but his boss wants him to find out a secret that some of the monks know, and so she sets him to this task, and there's conspiracies and weird science and glorious adventures and weird and wonderful inventions, and it's just fantastic. And I got distracted talking about it, and okay, no, it was first published in October 2019, so it's very new release, and I would highly recommend it. This is the only book on this list that I got a review copy of, actually. It was a NetGalley copy that I got and read, and I actually would really love to have the physical edition of it because it is gorgeous. There are maps, oh, beautiful. But anyway, this is an absolutely brilliant book, and I would highly recommend it. So that's the end of my favourite books read in 2019. This is a long video, but we got there in the end. Thank you very much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and you'll see me again very soon. Bye!